So I was talking to my buddy Sadikist the other day, and he had this message he wanted me to pass on. He said, "Hey, ba, azivada azimada. It's your boy Sada from the Shadows here, and let me tell you about this super service called Alpha Draft. If you can get down there for a pop, it's got all the fantasy draft you bloody well want. It's got a lot of heart. It's got a lot of dedication. It's going to go far. And you trust me in all of that." Love you, Matt, but that is actually sort of how you are. I'm going to get that. That's far. That's still a bit too Irish, but I'm going to get you, motherfucker. So, okay. FNATIC have broken CSGO. At the moment, it's like they've got the cheat codes to the game. Yeah, no jokes involved there. They literally just win every tournament, and this lineup has won their first 6 LANs they've been to. Who can stand against them? That's the big problem, right? Before you look at how good they are as a team, you have to really acknowledge the fact that at the moment they have no peer group. They don't have anyone who's standing level with them or anyone who looks like they're going to beat them with regularity. So, okay, there's 2 teams that have ever beaten them with this new lineup. NIP beat them at Fragbite Masters. That NIP lineup has gone. Alu has gone. They brought in Pitt, and they are far from an elite threat at the moment. In fact, they haven't even been to many lands, and they've still got a lot of work to do to get to the point where they could win a tournament and get to a final and beat FNATIC there. Then you go ahead and you look. Envious won 2 series against them. Envious was very dangerous for a while. Envious won Game Show Global. But aside from that, Envious is making semis or not even making it that far, coming in last place in some tournaments, going out of group stage in some tournaments, and losing repeatedly to teams like Na'Vi, losing out to Dignitas, getting these upsets against them, losing maps to CLG. So Envious is just in no position to reach finals and be able to stop FNATIC from winning tournaments. Even though in the group stages and in earlier on parts of the tournament, as long as it's not elimination point, they can beat FNATIC. Then you got to look at the fact that Luminosity and Na'Vi were the 2 best threats to FNATIC's title. They both play some great games against FNATIC. They both have a tactical style, but both have re-upped in terms of skill. Na'Vi have always been there in terms of skill, but Flamey started to develop more. Luminosity have improved in skill with the new lineup. And what's the problem? Well, first of all, Luminosity doesn't have quite enough skill, and they have this mad penchant for losing super close games to FNATIC, and in general for losing super close games. Actually, they don't tend to prevail on those. Then you look at the fact that Na'Vi have the skill, and they have a fantastic lineup, and just when they've gotten to the point where they should be able to beat FNATIC, you feel like, Flamey's there, Guardian was the best player in the world, or was tied with Olaf Meister for that title. What happens at this tournament? Guardian falls completely off the wagon, just turns to shit completely. Flamey's playing well, but he's just one man on his own. Seized is doing his best, as he always does when someone drops off, to like fill it, take up the slack, fill in the vacuum there, but it's not enough. And even Na'Vi playing really, really well at the moment. At the moment, they've never had everyone play well at once, almost. It's just not going to happen in that lineup. And their tactical style is a little bit too forced. They're very good at it, and they can always grind out. What's great about Na'Vi is how good they are at grinding. But first of all, they force spy a lot when it doesn't make sense for them, when they could get an open Guardian's hand otherwise. And also, they're a team where their CT drops off a little bit too much. They rely too much on their very good T side. They have the map pool to go head-to-head with FNATIC, but that's where the issue comes in. So Luminosity and Na'Vi were supposed to be the 2 teams facing FNATIC, right? Luminosity always loses to FNATIC. Luminosity lose these heartbreak games to FNATIC. FNATIC can still thrash them on certain maps. Then you look at Na'Vi. Na'Vi can't beat FNATIC. Na'Vi's in a position where right now, they're looking like they're in trouble. Like, Guardian doesn't look like the godlike player of the last 5 months. And if that continues, they're going to drop away from even being a threat. So you go beyond those 4 names. Okay, the obvious next ones are... Oh, you also have to consider that Luminosity is not a good sign either. That Cold Zero dropped off at this IEM. It was just very mediocre land for his level. He was okay. He was fragging decently, but he wasn't this monster player that he was before. Then you look Astralis on paper. You look at the roster. They have all the tools. They have enough tactics. They have good team play. They have a great amount of experience together. They are champions. They have a strong map pool. They have players who are very skilled at all the roles. Problem is, at the moment, their players can't handle the pressure. Their star players like Device don't turn up in the big game. When they're in the big game, the tactics are good, but then they fall apart in other areas of the game, in the pressure rounds, in the 1v1s, and the 2v2s when they're against FNATIC. Their map pool's good, it's still very well-rounded, but it's not as exceptional anywhere anymore. Now, even maps like Overpass, they can lose to FNATIC. Then you look, the last name is Virtus Pro. Virtus Pro is in one of the worst slumps of their career. They're in no position to threaten FNATIC. And so as a result, there's all the names that have either beaten FNATIC or have come close to and were threatening them over the last few months. And you see there's no challenger there. Envy should have been it, but Envy can't even make it and win titles, except the one where FNATIC wasn't in attendance. The rest of the field's a joke in comparison to FNATIC. Like, Mouse Sports is just an eco show. They can't win big tournaments. G2 are these old, washed-up players who have a decent style and can still do well against the lower-level competition, but they're nowhere from a FNATIC. Even if they can get the odd map every now and then, maybe. Dignitas were looking really hot, like they were going to rise up, they were going to be a new tactical force. They just got rocked the fuck out at the major qualifier. So you look at the field, FNATIC has no rival. Now when you consider those big names that I mentioned, with this lineup, FNATIC has beaten Luminosity in 3 Best of X series. They've beaten Na'Vi in 2, they've beaten Astralis in 4, they've beaten Virtus Pro in 2. Now Envy's the only one who's beaten them. They've beaten them twice, but then Envy can't be enough of a threat elsewhere in the tournament in terms of blocking them from winning. This kingdom of FNATICs now, because they are the kings of CSGO at the moment. They're the best team in the world. It's clear. It's not actually even that close in terms of, yes, teams can play them close, but they're the ones who always make the final. They're the ones who always win. The way they win is overall so dominant that, yes, the other teams are lower, but this is their kingdom at this point in time. This is their era. This is the darkest timeline in history when you consider all those teams and how few there are who can battle against them. I mean, the old FNATIC had some great teams to battle against. They had LDLC early on going into Envious, who were always right there with them, an elite level team who could also win events. Then you had, okay, they couldn't beat FNATIC at the time, but then they would win the event. It's the opposite of the new Envy now, when new Envy can beat FNATIC, but they can't win the fucking event. Then you had teams like NIP was still pretty solid and playing Na'Vi and FNATIC close, even though they obviously wouldn't win many times. Virtus Pro was still a threat and did in fact beat FNATIC. ESEA. TSM rose up to become very good. Na'Vi started to develop at the very end. They had lots of rivals. They had a very vibrant player group, and that's why their dominance wasn't in terms of like dominating individual tournaments so much. It was more like just winning again and again and how impressive it was. This FNATIC has a different type of dominance. So for me, the sick thing about them is they have broken the game in a way. They've become like the new NIP, and they're just so dominant, and the way they're winning is almost crushing to the game because people can't stand against them. I mean, this FNATIC, it's like they break all the rules. It feels like they win every tournament, because they have. But it feels like they're going to. This is this crushing inevitability to them in every tournament right now. It feels like they win every map. They obviously don't win every map. They lose maps here and there. In each tournament they lose maps. But you look at the maps that they're losing, and there's not even as much rhyme or reason to it. The map pool right now is sick for FNATIC. Because you look at them as a team, they now, after this tournament, on LAN with this lineup, have an above 50% win rate on 6 of the 7 maps. So on Dust 2, they've won 9 out of 10 games. Everyone bans Dust 2 against them. Everyone's scared to play it against them. Their only loss was to NIP at Fragback Masters, and the old NIP with Alu was very good on Dust 2. The old NIP doesn't exist anymore. They're even beating Na'Vi on Dust 2, and Na'Vi are fucking monsters on that map, so no one can play them on Dust 2. Everyone's so scared of them because they've got that great mixture of skill and team play there, which makes Dust 2 so dangerous. Also, JW's come back to form. Then you look at Inferno. Their Inferno, after this tournament, they've won 17 out of the 20 times they played it on LAN. By far their most played map, because everyone else is willing to play Inferno against them. Envious loves Inferno. Na'Vi will play a bit of Inferno of Force 2. Virtus Pro will play Inferno of Force 2. Astralis like Inferno. Luminosity love Inferno. You look at all these teams. Dignitas will play Inferno. You can see everyone plays Inferno, and that's part of the problem, because now FNATIC's been able to build on the back of Inferno another era, another dynasty, just like they did with the old FNATIC, when old FNATIC boast out in late 2014, from Face It onwards, winning those 3 tournaments in a row, and then winning ASEA after the major, and having that 6 streak of tournaments where what they were doing was, they were just so good on Inferno, and every other good team would play them on Inferno. Back then, it was LDLC, it was Dignitas, it was Na'Vi, it was Virtus Pro, was NIP. All these teams would play them on Inferno. FNATIC was the best on Inferno, therefore FNATIC would win titles and clinch titles on Inferno. That's what this new FNATIC is doing. Inferno is where they go to kill their opponents, close the series, and just win out. They've won 85% of their games on Inferno. The 3 losses they've had, Envious at the first Face It. Actually, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. How could it be Envious at the first Face It? Let me think. Who have they actually lost to on this map? It can't be Envious, can it? They haven't played them on it. Who do I mean there? I can't remember that one. Anyway, let me think. They've lost to Luminosity, obviously this tournament. They lost to X-Titan. I mean Envious, ESL, ESEA, that's right. So there's the 3 times they've lost, and none of those teams, except Luminosity, are in a position right now to threaten them again. That is a great matchup, and obviously we saw that was great in this final now. But this team is the best in the world on Inferno. No one is as good as them. I mean, when you win 17 out of 20 games, you're fucking unreal on that map. 85% win rate after 20 maps played is mind-boggling shit. So this is on the level of the old FNATIC, which I consider the old FNATIC the best Inferno team in history. They're already approaching that level in terms of what they're doing. Now, maybe not in terms of how beautifully they play the map. Old FNATIC was incredible. They actually set the meta on that map, that CT-sided style of play, and everyone else's smoking timings were copied off FNATIC. And then Olaf Meister and Crims were the gods of playing that B-side, particularly Crims. And then JW was just famous for dancing around the map with the AWP. This team's different from that, and they have to win both sides of the map, but they're still incredibly dominant there. Those are their first two maps. Then you get to Cash. Now, Cash is sort of their pocket pick. They don't get to play it as often as some of their others. It's one of their more played maps, but it's the one where people don't think of it as a sick map for them. But you look at it, they have an 80% win rate on Cash after 10 games played. They lost to Nip at Fragbite Masters. Again, that Nip doesn't exist now. They've won 5 straight after that. Then they played Astralis here and lost, but that was the incredibly late at night game where FNATIC was already up at map and they had a big lead. It looked as though they could have won there. And now, obviously, they thrashed Luminosity on it here, even though Luminosity is supposed to have a good T-side. It didn't matter. FNATIC's T-side was godlike. So FNATIC has 3 maps there that are 80% or more win rate. Then you go to their 4th best map, which now is Overpass, because they just won it against the guys from Luminosity. Luminosity's best map, remember, they're beating Astralis and Luminosity on Overpass. These are the 2 best teams in the world on that map. These are 2 specialists on that map. Have a 75% win. They've only played it 4 times. It's their least played map, but they've won 3 of them. So how can you fuck with that? Their only loss was to SK Gaming, the one that had Cadian in it before Pimp joined at Fragbite Masters. So who the fuck's going to beat them on Overpass? And now teams have to be afraid to play them there. And they haven't played it many times, but they're looking really good already. It's starting to move up. Cobblestone, we know they're really solid on, and that's like the outlier map. They'll play you there if they have to, but otherwise they don't need to. They've won 5 out of 7 times, 71% win rate. Their 2 losses, Nip at Fragbite Masters, so a team that doesn't exist again in terms of that lineup, and Envious at ESL ESEA. Envious has to get to FNATIC to play them on Cobblestone. They've won the last 4 on straight on Cobblestone, and that's their 3rd worst map. And they've won the last 4 straight and only lost twice ever there and have a 71% win rate. You can see that. If you have 5 maps, 70% plus or win rate, 70% plus win rate, you are fucking incredible. Most of the best teams in the world will only have like 70 to 8% win rate on like their best map or 1 or 2 maps. FNATIC has 70% plus win rate on 5 of the 7 maps. Then you go to their 6th best map, Mirage. Now this is where they have shown weakness. Like they started off hot on it, but then they really cooled off. So they lost to Virtus.pro at Face It in the first tournament. That's fine though, because Virtus.pro were monsters on that map and was still a very good team. They lost to Na'Vi on it. Na'Vi also a classic team on that map, even if they've cooled off a little bit. They lost to Envious on it, which was a bit shocking because Envious was just developing that. Team question mark they lost to, but that's one of the better maps for the guys who are now Astralis. Luminosity obviously is their classic map, and they had lost their last 4 straight, which I think counts some of those ones there. That might be counting the Na'Vi, Envy, Team Question Mark, Luminosity. So that's a weakness for them, but you know why it's not a weakness? That is what they ban. That is their perma ban at the moment, so they just don't play Mirage. Now, statistically, their worst map is Train, which they have a 42% win rate on, and they've won 3 out of 7 games. But, remember, it's not their most banned map. They're actually willing to play you on Train. Now, their losses, they lost to Luminosity at Face It, the first one. They lost to Na'Vi, and in ESEA Pro League Finals, and they lost to Envious twice. So again, Envious are for half of their losses on Train, but Envious have to get to FNATIC to be able to beat them. So their weaknesses are Mirage they ban, and then you have to get to them to be able to play, and you have to get to them, play Train, and be Envious to be able to beat them. And that's not happening at the moment. So right now, incredibly strong on Dust 2, Inferno, Cash, Overpass becoming pretty strong, Mirage, in theory, bad, but they don't play it. They permaban. And Cash, their Train, I would have said bad until recently, but now I have to put it in like the questionable area where actually they're not bad on it because we saw what they did to fucking Virtus.pro, the original gods of Train last year. So what's sick is map pool is utterly unreal right now. It's hard to know where you go for any teams because right now, the FNATIC have this thing with how skilled they are and how crazy the starts they get are and how sick their CT side is, even on maps they're not that good on, that it looks right now like they can break the rules. You could be better than them on a map. You could be Virtus.pro on Train. You could be Luminosity on Overpass. You could be Na'Vi on... let me think, what would Na'Vi be good at? Cobblestone. And they'll probably still beat you anyway. Because they're just getting these sick edges where they're so skilled and their team plays so sick right now that it's just hard to go against them no matter how good your tactics are. So they're a team right now that can win any side almost, it feels like, on any map. I mean, they can go against Virtus.pro and Inferno and just stomp T-side 14-1. They can go against Virtus.pro and Train, where sick teams win the T half, and they can just monster the CT side there and roll over completely. They can go on Cash, where everyone at the moment is super sick on T side, including them, and teams like Luminosity have a very good T side, and they can just put up insane CT sides against all these different teams, like get 10 rounds, 11 rounds, and just shut it out like that. So at the moment, they can win on any side, and they're a threat at all times on every side. They get these crazy rolls going where they'll start 6-0, they'll start 7-2, they'll start 9-1 in games. And as a result, they're already just way ahead of the game, and the teams are just struggling already. And then when teams start having to question, do we force buy now and give them more rounds and make it even harder? Do we fight back now? Do we try and save and give them more rounds in that sense? And then try and gamble that we can win all the gun rounds afterwards. It's so difficult. We saw Astralis on Overwatch win like one gun round against FNATIC, and that's like Astralis' map compared to FNATIC. They got these sick comebacks. Admittedly, their comebacks in general tend to be when they're on CT side. On CT side, they just go crazy with skill, do crazy force bites, and somehow they get these mad comebacks. But right now, their CT ability to come back reminds me of the old FNATIC at the beginning of that period, when they were the super CT dominant team on Inferno, Mirage, Cash, etc., before later 2015, when they became the team that was winning half and half, a bunch of T sides, a bunch of CT side, but wasn't as dominant on CT side. Their force buy style has just destroyed the metagame completely, because it shouldn't work. Like, Envious can't even do this force buy this well, and they're the ones who innovated this style. They do it, and they do the Envious style suicide ones, where they're force buying themselves to death, but their difference is they don't suicide from doing that. They can get out of it. That's what's so crazy. It's actually not that often that they suicide themselves by over force buying a CT and ending up with terrible guns. Somehow they'll turn that with their skill and how many good players they've got right now into victories and spin it around. So it's hard to even criticize. It's not good Counter-Strike fundamentally, but they are winning with it. You can't stop them winning with it. It's so sick. And as a result, teams that are more fundamentally sound, that are playing more the correct way, and even have good skill comparable to FNATIC, can't break through, because this style is just resetting the game over and over and over. Their skill is unreal right now. Envious on paper had the sick lineup where every player could have been a god, but Kiyoshima's been terrible in this Envious. Kenny S has started to come on stronger and stronger, but now his team's dropping off. Happy's been still pretty good. MBK's dropped off a lot ever since he had to switch to more of an entry role, and Apex is just still mercurially sick. So Envious don't count in terms of skill. They can't manifest as much in the game. For FNATIC, you know all of Meister and Crims are going to be there in the game. You know that JW start to get more and more consistent, putting up good numbers, and then Flush is going to have single maps where he just takes over. Now, Dennis doesn't have to do very much at all. He's playing like kind of the fifth Lauren role in terms of not having to contribute that much in terms of fragging to win the titles, but they're still winning regardless. And he just puts in the odd ridiculous round, very rarely, and they still win no matter what. For me, the problem with FNATIC is we're trying to compare FNATIC to the old FNATIC lineup, which had a bit more tactics, the reading of the game from Pronax. They developed more of their T-side in terms of being able to grind. The game was much more focused around Crimson Olfmeister. There wasn't the JW factor towards the end. Flusher was good at the majors, but otherwise he would drop off, and Pronax himself wasn't much of a fragger. Their map pool was super strong, but it was more that they were consistent across the maps. It wasn't that they were monster gods on certain maps and just unbeatable. And the map pool would constantly shift as the meta of the other teams and the time of the side strengths on the map changed. This new FNATIC shouldn't be compared to that FNATIC. The new FNATIC is NIP. It's the early CSGO NIP. They've got the tourney streak where they've won all their first tournaments. NIP won their first 10 tournaments, not all of them international, not all of them super stacked. FNATIC's won their first 6 tournaments, all international, mostly stacked. They've got no true rival, which NIP didn't have. They had very games, but they always beat them. They had the other teams that were trying to come up and make it like Luminosity and could be compared to like a Western Wolves. Na'Vi could be compared to, let me think, Apache Navi's probably very games because they beat them every time, but Na'Vi seems to have the skill and the tactics to be able to beat them, but they can't quite do it, and Na'Vi can beat everyone else. So I guess that one works. They just have no true rival like NIP didn't. They're in a weaker timeline of competition, even though the era of CS is incredibly competitive in terms of how many people are trying to compete and how many good players there are and how many teams get to events. At the moment, the field is a bit weaker than it was in autumn of last year, the fall period of last year, when we had all those 6 teams, TSM, Envious, FNATIC, Virtus.pro, then we had the dangerous teams underneath. Right now, instead, it's a weaker timeline. Just like at the beginning of CSGO, it was a weak timeline when NIP was dominating, and sometimes tournaments wouldn't even have all the best teams there. This team can win from any position. just like NIP could. Even if you beat NIP on the first half, NIP was going to come back on the second half somehow. Didn't matter if it was an imbalanced aspect. They would get it done on the T side when the game was super CT sided. NIP won first and foremost by having the most skill at the time, by having crazy amounts of skill, which obviously with Get Right and Forest at the time they had. Well, you overlook at FNATIC and they have Olofmeister, the best player in the world, just like Get Right was the best player in the world back then. Now, admittedly, Crims is very, very good and very stable, but he's not comparable to what Forest was back then. But for me, it's like they've broken out the Forrester role in as much as when you combine JW, Crims and Flusher, and 2 of the 3 go off, that's going to match up to what you would have gotten from Forest in being super sick and having those 2 players who carry the whole game anyway. They're also a team where once you get past skill, yes, they have some team play. Not as much team play as the old FNATIC. That was the core super strength for me of the old FNATIC. Their team play was what was fantastic. They had a little bit of tactics with Forex's reading and some set strats and proper economy management. They had a good amount of skill, but they shifted it from player to player, from Crims, JW, over to Olofmeister, Flusher. They shifted who the stars were, whereas this team is like Nip in as much as they've got the mad skill and they've got a decent amount of team play. There's enough interaction to make them very good. Not FNATIC levels, but just enough that they win the clutch situations. Olofmeister and Crims can win 2vx versus anyone. They win enough of those situations that they are this incredible team. So right now, they're so broken. And right now, it sounds, by the way, I'm not depressed when I say it. When I say it's a dark time, I mean it as much as you look at the scene and you go, who's going to beat FNATIC? How is someone going to beat them? What maps are they going to beat them on? In what way are they going to beat them when they can give it to you in all these different ways? It's dark in that sense if you're someone who wants to cheer for another team. I'm actually going to enjoy this FNATIC dominance. It's been incredible so far, and if it can continue, this is superlative stuff. Because for me, this streak right now might already be the best in history. Because if you consider Nip's streak, there's a lot of nuances that people don't understand about how their streak went on there, where a lot of those events were much weaker than these ones are now and didn't have the same context of how high level they were. So this is incredible what they're doing. Even though I've said time and time again, they don't look as impressive as the old FNATIC at their peak because the field doesn't look as good and the way they're winning looks sloppier, but you can't deny it's effective. You can't deny, it's not efficient, but it's effective. You can't deny that it might not be beautiful, but it's dominating. It's winning CS right now. They're the best team in the world. They have the best player in the world, and they're an incredible team to watch right now.